And your Superman? He'll stand trial. They all will. He was right, you know. About what?
It's treason, though.
Put in the same position, I might have done the same thing. We never know what we're truly capable of. I hope for your world's sake you never find out. Just keep this in mind. Yeah? If something ever happens and you do lose it, I'm coming for you. You'll have to get in line.
Red Sun Cage. Okay. So, that's the end of the story mode. It's interesting, obviously. But there are... Ultimately, I wanted to replay this game because I couldn't remember most of the story. And also because I've just been bombarded with all of these, like, anti-heroes and evil Superman messages the last couple of years. Honestly, the last couple of months, because the Brightburn DVD came out recently, and that's Evil Superman, and the Joker trailer came out the other day, a new Joker trailer or whatever, and everybody's talking about how amazing it's going to be, and it always just makes me think about how boring the I'm so sad white man villain is, and how, like, this is also a version of that, right? So while you watch the credits, there are, like, two reasons why I think Fascist Superman doesn't work. And I've talked about them a little bit throughout playing this game, and I don't know if anybody agrees, or if it's just me talking into the ether. Obviously, I'm talking into a part of the ether because no one's actually watching right now. But I don't think people who write or create stories about, like, fascist or evil Superman always ends up sort of a fascist because he's, you know, the Ubermensch. Actually, I don't think they actually like Superman. I think largely those are the people who, looking at normal, everyday Superman, think, well, this is a really boring character. He's so overpowered, right? Because it's never actually about what would happen if Superman were evil, right? The interesting version of that story, I think, is Red Sun. Superman lands in the wrong place, is raised by people with very different opinions. We're going to talk about this over this lovely song. And what happens if Superman is raised with the Soviet Union, right? You know, what happens in these situations? And I suppose there's an interesting conversation about, like, what happens if Superman loses Lois in this particular way and then becomes angry. But would he actually end up becoming a fascist? And I don't think people who like Superman think that he would. So it's never actually about what if Superman were evil. It's like, it's basically people who take that one line, actually a decent line from Batman v Superman, the, you know, if we believe that there is even a 1% chance that he could turn, we have to take that as absolute certainty. It's people who hear that line and think, yes, Batman is fully correct. There is a possibility that a creature this powerful, that's a good outfit for Oliver, a creature this powerful would become an ultimate evil, that would become a fascist dictator. We cannot trust him, therefore we must always be paranoid. We should take him out. And it's sort of like saying, yeah, Batman in this situation is right. All of his paranoia is correct. The version of that story that I actually think is more interesting is the Tower of Babel story from the comics, or if you're more familiar with the animated movies, I think it's Justice League Doom, where it turns out Batman has a secret file that gets corrupted. In the comics, it's Ra's al Ghul. In the movie, it's Brother Eye. And he has this file of, like, how to take out every single member of the Justice League if they were to turn evil. And it's used against them. And then they find out that Batman has this file and that, you know, he hasn't told them about it, and they kick him out of the Justice League. And I think that's more interesting, right? Let's talk about Batman's paranoia. But Fascist Superman is just not about Superman. Doom / Tower of Babel is about Batman, right? It's, you know, what happens if this fatal flaw that Batman has, his paranoia, is exploited. And the fascist evil Superman stories are actually more interested in Batman, or more about like Batman and Superman fighting, but much more interested in the character development of Batman and not interested in the character development of Superman. Right? They're not talking about Superman's internal struggle. It's not Superman becomes the weapon that takes out Metropolis and the thing that kills Lois, which then takes out Metropolis, and what he does with that grief and anger. It's not a story about grief and anger. It's a story about, you know, one bad day and this man with ultimate power becomes a fascist. And the other thing that I have a problem with these stories is that it always feels like what they're actually saying is that if they had Superman's powers, this is who they would become, right? That's the Joker thing, right? That's the idea that, like, if, you know, these people are justified, these evil people can justify their evil deeds, because wouldn't you also feel that way? Don't you, you know, feel anger at the world and want to lash out with a fist? And if you were someone like Superman, what would that become? If you had Superman's powers, I think a lot of times these people are saying in this very pessimistic way, it's an extremely pessimistic view, right, of Superman. It's, if you had Superman's powers, you would not be as good as him. You would not be good at all, probably. You would probably use it to help yourself in some way. And I just don't think that's very interesting. Right? It's a kind of humanizing of Superman in the worst way possible, saying that to be human is to be in some way a bad person, in some way evil. And that what makes Superman less human, more alien, less interesting to those people is that he is such a good person, that he's less relatable because he doesn't seek ultimate power despite technically already possessing ultimate power, right? He doesn't seek to be the ruler of the world, even though he could so easily be. And I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of the thing that makes Superman interesting, and the thing that he's actually about is that he was created to be an anti-fascist hero. You know, he's created at the height of, you know, fascist rule in Europe, the height of Nazi Germany, to be a hero for people who were being stepped on by fascists, to be the thing that they need, right? To be the thing that stands up to fascism and says, you don't have to be this way. Ultimate power does not need to corrupt. People are inherently good. And he's supposed to be an aspirational hero. He's supposed to be a character that we cannot be necessarily, but that perhaps we strive to be. And that's ultimately what I think superhero stories should be about, which is why corrupting Superman in this way is not as interesting as the constant internal battle that Clark Kent and Superman have to go through to not become this character. I also don't think that it's entirely interesting to just make him always good with no struggle. Like, he should always struggle with, I could save the entire world, but I can't do that because the only way to do it is to become a dictator. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the game and my 10-minute rant that I just went on. Perhaps I'll clip that out. I am not going to be streaming all the time, but I'll try to do it a little more regularly with fewer fascist rants, or anti-fascist rants. A little more fun. Maybe I'll play the second game. I haven't actually finished that one yet. Alright. Thanks to everybody who's watching, which is right now nobody, but whoever watches eventually.